The Joe Biden document dilemma continues, and now the very estimable Democrat called David Axelrod, the guy many people might say is responsible for electing Joe Obama or Barack Obama or Joe Biden or many other Democrats that you might know, love, or hate. He is now saying, sorry, Joe, there is a there. There is a big problem, and we're going to talk about it. The media is still diving into this. David Axelrod, a very important political consultant, got brought up today during the press briefing with Karine Jean-Pierre. We'll listen to what the White House had to say before we turn our attention back over to the Senate, because they want to know what was in the Biden documents. They want to know if it had anything to do with Burisma or Hunter Biden or anything else, and they're entitled to know. That's what they do in the Senate. So we'll talk about all of it. But first, before we learn about what David Axelrod, this fella, you know his face, what he said, let's refresh our recollection on who this guy is. There is some background that is provided to us over from Wikipedia. They tell us David Axelrod, American political consultant, former White House official, best known for being the chief strategist for Barack Obama's presidential campaign. After Obama's election, he was appointed to be senior advisor to the president. Left the position in 2011, became a senior strategist for his re-election, joined CNN, and he's been all over the place. Right. He was almost kind of like the Karl Rove of the Bush years, if you remember that. They used to call Karl Rove the architect. And this guy was a very similar individual. And so when he speaks, all the Democrats perk up. We're going to hear from Karine Jean-Pierre. She was actually, I think, a student of his. She worked with him at some point in time. But David wrote an article over at The Atlantic, and he says the following. He says, yes, Mr. President, there is some there, buddy. Axelrod says Biden's team should have been more transparent about his classified documents, but he still thinks the strategy might work out well for him in the end. This article was published January 27th. It says the following from David. He says, crisis communications at its core, it's pretty simple. Discern where the story is going, fully disclose the facts, admit where the mistakes were made, and do it all as quickly and thoroughly as possible. Basically exactly what Mike Pence did. He says, so it's been a little bit confusing to watch Joe Biden's White House deal with the discovery of these documents while he was vice president, stored in various locations, including his garage. He says the impact of the first discovery on November 2nd must have been immediately apparent to Biden's team, given the public uproar about Trump's documents. Even Biden himself said, how could anyone be so irresponsible? Biden rightly noted that documents are marked classified and top secret for a reason, to protect intelligence. Why then did it take months after the first discovery for the White House to acknowledge that Biden too had classified documents in his possession? And why did that acknowledgement come only after a leak to CBS News? Yeah, they didn't tell us about this. They weren't transparent at all. And why did the White House's first disclosure omit that there had been a second discovery of the documents on December 20th, the lie by omission, when Karine Jean-Pierre came out? I think it was on the 9th or the 12th. There have been sporadic additional discoveries announced, adding to a sense of furtiveness and a lack of transparency on Biden's part. Last week, Biden compounded his problems by declaring that when the special counsel investigation is complete, the country will discover that there's no there. That's what Biden said. Remember, he was standing there with Gavin Newsom, hovering over his shoulder like a little vulture waiting for the presidency. Axelrod says what he likely meant was that this will have found to have been an innocent mistake, probably made by staff as they just shoved documents in the boxes. Same thing that happened with Pence. He says, in Biden's defense, his lawyers, upon discovery of the first set, they did contact the head librarian and surrender the documents. The president's legal team has been cooperating. By contrast, Trump was obstructionary. Still, he says, Biden's comment that there's no there landed clumsily, as there were documents there. So there were documents there. I mean, there was something there in his old private office. There is some there. And the Biden White House seemingly have violated every precept: speed, transparency, contrition of crisis communications. They broke every rule under the sun. Here he says, I cut them a little slack here. From the moment the first documents were discovered, Biden's lawyers seized control. They wanted to protect their client from legal ramifications, not political ramifications. Do you believe that for a minute? You believe that they're really worried that Joe Biden's going to get in a bunch of trouble here? It's all politics, which is why the cover-up was more important than the transparency. The politics were a bigger threat than the legalities. That's why they covered it up. If it was the reverse, they would have done what Mike Pence did and just showed us the truth. Mike Pence doesn't have as many political liabilities as they do. And their objective has been to work with the probe and to be transparent. They don't have any choice. They're not, unless they're making a claim. Are they making a claim for the documents? No. Then what choice do they have but to be cooperative? Trump is saying they're my documents. That's the basis for his alleged obstruction. I presume that is why the Biden team didn't acknowledge when the CBS story broke that there was a second set of documents. Axelrod says, well, they quickly learned, however, that although prosecutors disdain disclosures from the subjects of their probes, leaks can still happen. This week, after the FBI searched the president's Delaware home, unnamed sources told CNN that federal investigators had been prepared to issue a warrant if the president had refused, though such a threat proved unnecessary. Let's look at this article. CNN said that there was going to be a warrant. Justice Department was prepared to seek a warrant had Biden not consented to the search. The FBI's unprecedented search of the president's home in Wilmington resulted from high-stakes discussions between the DOJ and Biden's lawyers. Biden's team says we cooperated. For its part, the DOJ said it would conduct the latest search. They were prepared to seek a search warrant. They didn't need one because they were cooperative. Man, they should have raided it. Should have raided it anyways. Go raid it. Because they were already obstructing. I'm not joking about that. They were obstructing it. They should have just gotten the warrant and gone and raided the property. They did that to Trump. Trump said the documents are safe and clear. They're fine. They're my documents. I've got legal claim to them. They're safe and fine. And they went and looked at it. And then they said, nope, you're obstructing and we're going to go take them from you. Literally, the same thing happened with Joe Biden. He said, oh, no, I have the documents. They're safe. DOJ sent him a letter mid-November, said stop searching. They kept searching. They made notice that they found more documents as a result of their additional searches, which they notified the archives about in mid-December. So as soon as the DOJ knew that they were still searching for documents, that was the obstruction. Search warrant should have been executed at that moment. They said, well, they're not following our simple, polite requests to stop searching. So now we have to go make sure the documents are safe and secure. They didn't do that. They did it for Trump. They could have gone and raided his Wilmington house and his Rehoboth house. They would have had the same pretext. Now, the difference here is they like Joe Biden. Okay, that's the only real difference. They don't like Donald Trump. They think he is stealing documents, and he is making a claim over those documents. Joe Biden, though, didn't even make a claim over the documents, all right? There was not even a legal basis for it that his attorneys made. They just said, here it is. So if they know that they should not continue to be in possession and they're not making a claim for it and they are disobeying a directive from the DOJ to stop searching for documents, how is that not obstruction and why did they not institute raids? Merrick Garland defended the DOJ. Justice Department's unhappy with the slow pace of the searches. The Biden document saga began early November. National Archives were notified. Then the DOJ was notified. They wrote a letter to Biden's legal team on November 10th outlining the specific processes and the protocols. Although there was no expectation that more classified documents would be found, they notified them that additional materials were discovered. It took more than 6 weeks after the initial discovery until they searched the house in Rehoboth. The legal team did not alert the DOJ that it had begun to search the homes until after the attorneys discovered the documents in Wilmington. Such notification wasn't required. The lack of advance notice irritated some justice officials. Yeah, and we know that the Washington Post reported that John Lausch or somebody sent a letter over mid-November. So I'm going to go through this and add this to the timeline. But they say that the White House insisted that searches were conducted in coordination with the Justice Department. But it doesn't sound like that's true at all. Doesn't sound like that's true at all. Why were they irritated then? Some were irritated that they didn't get advance notice. So they weren't actually done in coordination at all. This Biden administration is lying through their teeth about this story. And the media is slowly piecing it together. Garland has been kept, and Garland knows it too. Garland defended the DOJ's approach. Yeah, this is bad news. This is why Axelrod is coming out too. He says it was a gratuitous leak, perhaps meant to blunt criticism about political bias at the DOJ and the FBI. Yeah, Biden's team, because people like us were screaming about raid, raid, raid. Biden's team appears to be betting that full cooperation and less public conversation will lead to a benign conclusion from special counsel. For now, this is a docudrama. We'll see what the special counsel does. So that's David Axelrod, right? And when you start to lose David Axelrod, you start to lose some other Democrats who are ordinarily on your team. The media starts asking questions about that, which is exactly what happened today during the press briefing. Karine gets asked about David Axelrod's article. David Axelrod says Joe Biden and you, Karine, have really stepped in it. What do you say to that?
Thanks, Karine. David Axelrod, former top staffer for President Obama, wrote in a piece today for The Atlantic that Biden and the White House seemingly have violated every precept, speed, transparency, contrition of crisis communications in relation to the way that you have communicated about the classified documents found in his possession. I'm wondering if you agree with that assessment and your take on that.
Well, look, I know David Axelrod very well. I was part of his I was part of his program that he had at University of Chicago, and I respect him wholeheartedly, and got to work with him during the Obama-Biden administration. He has his opinion. I'm not going to make judgments on that, and he's allowed to share what he thinks. But I will say this, and I'm going to be very careful and prudent here. We take classified information and classified documents very seriously.
Karine!
And the president's team is fully cooperating with the current legal process at this time. I'm just not going to say anything more.
This is not a question about the handling of classified documents. It's a question of communication.
I just answered your question. I just answered your
No.
question.
You have no comment on whether the White
I
House...
literally just answered your question.
No.
But I did. I did.
No.
About whether or not you think the White House has done a good job communicating.
No, but I answered the first part. I answered it in my first part, which is I know David Axelrod. He has every right to have his opinion, and I've known him for a long time. I've worked closely with him, and that's all I'm going to say. Go ahead, Karen.
That's all we're going to say. So David Axelrod blasts her. She worked, sort of learned everything she knows from the guy, and he's not happy with the performance out of the current White House. Now, the media had some other questions, and most of these were being deferred out. We'll go through several of them. This individual tried his best to go back to November. So we just read the article from Van Jones. We read the article from... Axelrod was the one that we just read. And Axelrod said that they're doing a bad job. They're also asking about, what happened on that November 2nd date that caused them to act this way. What was the thinking back then on that day? The media still would love an answer.
Good, Brian.
Thank you, Karine. I want to go back to November 2nd. Why didn't the president go public on November 2nd when he found out from his lawyers that classified documents were found?
I would refer you to the White House counsel, who has put out statements on this, on their timeline, and speaking to this. My colleagues from the White House counsel has had conversations with many of you, answering questions on this. I would refer you to the White House counsel.
Before there was a federal investigation, he could have gone public at
I would
that
refer
point.
you to the White House counsel. Go ahead, Alex.
That guy's new there. I don't think that he knows that she doesn't answer those questions. It's funny because as soon as he asks that and she punts it, everybody else's hands go up. I don't know if you saw that. Like, watch it right here. This guy's hands go up. He's like, oh, that's a throwaway question. She's not answering that. Call me next.
I would refer you to the White House.
Boom. Hand up. First hand up next. Not answering that one. You see him? He knows how to play this game. He goes, oh, that's going to be a deferral question. Defer to White House counsel. I'm next.
Refer you to the White House
Boom,
counsel.
there it is.
Who has?
He was the first one up, by the way. Nice job. Well done. Very fast. So there are questions about what Joe Biden is doing. Evidently, he's flying to Camp David tonight. Question is, why is he going back over to Delaware just for one simple night? If he's in Camp David, why doesn't he just stay there in Camp David? Why does he just have to get on a plane and fly over to Delaware for one simple night? What's going on over there?
Is there a specific reason the president's leaving Camp David to go to Delaware just for that one night on Sunday?
I don't have anything to preview about what he's going to be doing specifically. All I can tell you is that he's going to be leaving Camp David and going to Wilmington, Delaware.
And his travel for next week, the Baltimore-New York travel obviously is infrastructure related and tunnel specific, Philadelphia on the economy, but they're obviously very blue cities. Why the focus on those three places next week? Why did you guys pick that?
Well, I think, first, I'm not going to get ahead of the president. He will lay out the importance of his travels to those particular tunnel and why he wanted to highlight those tunnels, so certainly not going to get ahead of him. Look, remember, it's a bipartisan infrastructure legislation. We were in Kentucky in the beginning of the year, which was a bridge in Kentucky that was really important in the region. And we had, you saw Mitch McConnell, you saw a bipartisan effort of folks elected officials who came together to talk about a bridge that for decades presidents had wanted to fix and have not been able.
Bridges. All right. So he's flying back for some reason. We don't really know why. We're going to hear from Karine Jean-Pierre. Karine Jean-Pierre gets a question from Peter Doocy. And as usual, we love Doocy time. He is bringing up a question or a point that John Kirby made, which we heard from earlier this week. John Kirby is the person who might be replacing Karine Jean-Pierre sometime soon. We'll see. But he is asking about something John Kirby said about this self-reporting thing that they're claiming the president did, even though they didn't. We're going to hear from him in a minute, right after we talk about our friends over at 4patriots.com, because as you know, food shortage could be coming, even here in the United States. We've got drought, inflation, new economic policies, war. Our food supply is getting close to its breaking point. That's why survival food is more important now than ever. And you can create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4Patriots survival food kits ever. It's not ordinary food. Good for 25 years, super survival food, hand-packed right in family-owned facilities in the United States, giving jobs to over 200 Americans. They are sturdy, compact, they stack easily. Many different delicious breakfast, lunches, and dinners. You can make them in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. Even I can do it. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com. Use code Robert to save 10% off anything in the store, including a 3-month, 90-day survival kit. You'll get free shipping on anything over $97, plus their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order. They're called 4Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans. And you can go to 4patriots.com, use code Robert, save 10% off your first purchase, and start building your own stockpile today. All right, my friends. And now let's listen to what Peter Doocy had to say, because he always has fun, spicy questions for Karine. Peter Doocy wants to know why Joe Biden and the White House continue to say that they self-reported this document saga to us. They didn't. CBS broke the news, and then it all came unglued as soon as the story leaked. But why didn't they tell us in the first place?
Documents. Have any more classified documents been located in any places associated with President Biden?
I would refer you to the White House Counsel's office.
Okay, and why do White House officials insist that the president self-reported the classified materials if his lawyers initially called the White House and not the Justice Department?
I would refer you to the White House Counsel.
But we heard from this podium the other day that President Biden self-reported the materials. That's not exactly what happened.
Who did you hear that from?
John Kirby.
John Kirby?
Well, I would refer you to the White House Counsel.
What? What? Well, John Kirby said it. He's not the White House counsel, so why doesn't she bring John Kirby back out here so we can ask him that question? So Doocy tried to hit him with their own words, but she wasn't letting him have it. And so we will now turn our attention over to what's happening in Congress, because the White House doesn't want to talk about any of this stuff. Congress would love to know more, though. They are not being allowed access, unfortunately. Mark Warner and Marco Rubio, two senators, have said that they want access to know what Biden took, what were in the documents. And Mark Warner is a Democrat. Marco Rubio is a Republican. So this is a bipartisan request now. Doesn't America love unity and bipartisan requests? Are they going to get their hands on any of these documents and learn what's inside? Let's see. If we go over to the article here, they tell us that Biden officials block Senate Intelligence Committee from viewing the mishandling of the documents. What's going on with this article over here? Here it is. It says here by Joseph Clark over from the Washington Times. It tells us that Republican and Democratic senators have left a closed-door meeting on Wednesday with Avril Haines. She's the director of national intelligence, this woman you see here. So they met with her. Fuming is the word, that the Biden administration is withholding details about Biden and Trump's, so they want Trump stuff too, mishandled classified documents. They want to know, what did these people have? I'd like to know. Senator Mark Warner, who we're going to hear from next, he's a Virginia Democrat who he chairs the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, kind of the opposite of what the House of Representatives has, said the Office of DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, is blocking the release of key details of documents until the DOJ concludes its investigations. Says, I'm very disappointed with the lack of detail. Every member of the committee should get access to it, says Mark Warner. His frustrations were echoed by Marco Rubio from Florida, He said the administration is stonewalling and impeding our ability to provide oversight of the intelligence community. And I would love to know what documents Trump had. I would love to see what all of these documents are. Are they going to tell us? No, because they're classified, right? Top secret, national security, blah, blah, blah. Classified here, and all the different layers of that, right? Top secret, whatever. So it is very unlikely we're going to know the actual content, but we do want to know at least like the categories. And in particular, whether they were categories that might involve conflicts of interest. Okay, I think that maybe Trump's, if they, for example, are letters from Kim Jong-un, these are just nice little love letters that are more like mementos. That might be different than Joe Biden taking some, intelligence briefing out that might be useful to Hunter for his sales emails to Burisma Ukraine business developments in that theater, right? One might be a conflict of interest, the other might not. One might be a national security document technically, but it's a non-conflicted national security document. The other, right, might be actually useful for nefarious purposes. That's why I want to know what the broad categories are. The ODNI has also not provided a risk assessment concerning the documents recovered in the raid. Ms. Haynes said in August the intelligence community would conduct a review. John Cornyn, Texas Republican on the committee, said Wednesday that the briefing raised questions about whether the ODNI had viewed documents. Says, my understanding is that the ODNI's position is that if the Attorney General says that this is, quote, an ongoing investigation, well, you cannot get access to those documents and that will stand. So let's listen to these two people explain it, because they are upset that they're not getting access to this stuff. Here is Marco Rubio and Senator Warner explaining this with CBS News, asked about these meetings.
Oversight, bipartisan history, are going to unfortunately no. And this.
Start that over.
Do you have any timeline in terms of when you will get visibility into the documents, classified material that both President Biden and President Trump had in their residences?
Margaret, unfortunately, no. And this committee has had a long bipartisan history of doing its job. And our job here is intelligence oversight. The Justice Department has had the Trump documents about 6 months, the Biden documents about 3 months. Our job's not to figure out if somebody mishandled those, but our job is to make sure there's not an intelligence compromise. And while the Director of National Intelligence had been willing to brief us earlier, now that you've got the special counsel, the notion that we're going to be left in limbo and we can't do our job, that just cannot stand. And every member of the committee who spoke yesterday, and I wanted the director to hear this, regardless of party, said, we are united in we have to find a way to do our job. That means we need these documents. We need that assessment.
We'd all like to see what they are.
The intelligence community would say their hands are tied because this is an ongoing, active Justice Department investigation.
So what? Why can't the senators see it?
What would meet the level of addressing your concerns without compromising that?
Well, I don't know how congressional oversight on the documents, actually knowing what they are, in any way impedes an investigation.
Yeah, why?
These are probably materials we already have access to. We just don't know which ones they are. And it's not about being nosy. You know, here's the bottom line. If in fact those documents were very sensitive, materials were sensitive, and they pose a counterintelligence or national security threat to the United States, then the intelligence agencies are tasked with the job of coming up with ways to mitigate that.
And we'd like to know if there are conflicts of interest, if the president is compromised, if he was stealing, America's secrets. And Trump too. I'd like to know if Trump was too. Okay, I doubt it, but I'd like to know. If he was selling secrets to the Russians or, exporting intelligence briefs to the Saudis or something, I would love to know that. Wouldn't you? Same with Joe Biden. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion the reason they don't want you to know about Trump's documents is probably because they're nothing. The reason they don't want you to know about Biden's documents is probably because they're something. But they can use the same excuse for both of them, and it works. No, they're ongoing investigations, so we can't give you either of them, Because if we showed you Trump's, you'd know we were just joking with all of this. If we showed you Biden's, we know there's a big problem there, is what I would suspect. But, of course, we'll continue to cover and see what else pops up with Joe Biden's documents. Thank you for liking this video and joining us wherever it is you're watching by subscribing, clicking the follow button, and making sure you stick around. So we look forward to seeing you on the next one.